I hereby call to order this meeting of the Triton Regional School Committee on March 5th, 2025 at 7 p.m. I'm Linda Lukovsky, Chair of the School Committee. I want to welcome everyone here tonight. A reminder that this meeting is being audio and video recorded. I'm going to read our vision statement. We are a community of learners known for our unwavering commitment to meeting the needs of all students. Through the adoption of best practices and our active partnership with families and the wider community who are united in supporting the development of engaged, successful, responsible, resilient learners. Students will be well prepared to be ethical, empathetic, and contributing citizens. Can we please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I want to thank all of you for being here tonight. This is the most well-attended meeting that we've seen. The next is the budget public hearing. Can I please have a motion to open the public hearing for the fiscal year 2026 district budget?
I'll make a motion to open the public hearing on the fiscal year 2026 Triton Regional School District budget.
I'll second.
Can we have a roll call vote? Erin?
Yes.
Kelly?
Yes.
Caitlin?
Yes.
Paul Goldner?
Yes.
Matt?
Yes.
Narissa?
Yes.
Paul Mayette?
Yes.
And I'm a yes as well. Thank you for coming tonight, both to satisfy Mass General Law and as a matter of good practice. The school committee holds a district budget hearing each year between the tentative budget and the final budget votes. The tentative budget and some materials from discussions are in the back of the room and also online if anyone needs a copy. I'm going to briefly go through the budget timeline so that you know what's happened already and what to expect in the future. And then I will turn this over to the superintendent to go through those documents. Am I supposed to read this after the public hearing? You got your roll call vote. Tonight is the 9th school committee meeting on this budget, plus 3 separate meetings with representatives from our 3 town governments. Tonight, after this hearing and meeting with our state legislators, we will provide final guidance on the budget in preparation for a final budget vote next Wednesday, March 12th. From there, the final budget is certified and sent to the towns for approval. At least 2 out of our 3 member towns have to pass the budget for it to be approved. This is normally a single vote at each town's town meeting, but Newbury and Rowley Select Boards have publicly said they are considering override votes. Overrides are required to raise additional funds from real estate taxes beyond new growth and what's allowed by Proposition 2.5 when the town doesn't have sufficient funds. And overrides require a majority approval from town voters on the ballot for the annual elections on May 13th. With overrides, there would need to be 2 yes votes in Raleigh and Newbury for the town to pass the Triton budget. 1 vote at town meeting on the budget amount and the 2nd vote at the ballot box to raise real estate taxes. If either vote fails, the budget is considered to have failed in that town. If the Triton budget does not pass in at least 2 of the 3 member towns, the school committee will need to change the school budget and send the new budget back to the towns for another round of votes. Any recalculation of the budget affects all 3 towns, so when reducing the budget, it has to be reduced for all towns. If 1 town passes it on the first round and the 2nd town fails, the town that passes cannot choose to pay that higher amount to reduce the impact on schools. They can choose to skip future votes since they already have an approval amount that's higher than what they will have to pay. The cycle for revising the budget and the towns voting on the new amounts continues until the budget is approved by at least 2 of our 3 towns voting yes. Triton does not have the authority to spend money after June 30th without an approved budget. If a budget is not approved by then, the state would create what's called a 1/12 budget for the district, with a set amount of funding the towns must pay month to month. The amount would likely be based on the current year FY25 budget, and towns would be forced to pay while the voting cycle continues until the budget is passed locally. The reason why I read all this is because 2 of our 3 towns are going for an override vote. So it's important for you to understand what that means if the votes don't pass. So I will now hand this over to Mr. Forget to go through the budget documents.
Thank you, Linda. So there are 2 documents over there. They've been online. There is the full tentative budget that I'm not going to walk through again. And then there is a 2-page on the printout. It's a front and back that details all of the changes. So you went through the process and all the meetings. This tentative budget was approved on February 12th. That is the basis for this public hearing. We have had further discussions, as you mentioned, working to what Salisbury's number could be and what they could afford. And so there are further reductions off of that tentative budget that the committee determined were appropriate next when a final budget is approved. So I'm going to focus on this updated changes that you have in front of you, 2-sided. If anyone has any questions about the full budget document, we're more than happy to answer questions offline. You can contact me or Brian or anyone, and happy to walk you through if there are questions about the spending. The full budget package has each school line by line with all the budget changes in history as well. So this budget this year, the principals and other administrators presented to you the needs. They did not come in with wild needs. They came in with actual needs. And we landed with a figure for an increase, which was approaching $3.7 million. That's a huge number. Part of that, certainly we are a human services organization, and in any human services organization, we are largely people-driven. And with 80 to 85% of our costs coming from employee costs, personnel benefits and such, obviously salaries and compensation in general and insurances are a huge budget driver. We have to, and we have lots of conversations with our towns about the cost of doing business, remaining competitive with employees, and the committee has been historically adamant that we are not going to be the highest paying, but we sure don't want to be the lowest paying either. We need to be regionally competitive with our salaries and our benefits in order to attract and retain educators and staff to Triton. So the 2 components of employee costs, salaries make up about a $1.3 million of the increase. In this year, an exorbitant increase with health insurance. We're looking at a 16.12% increase in the HMO and the healthcare, and then a 10.23% increase on dental. We have not seen those kinds of increases in many, many years. Obviously, we're working with the PEC and negotiating a new agreement on healthcare costs or on healthcare plans, but those are 2 major drivers. You add in the rest of an operation to run 600 and some odd thousand square feet of building and 450 employees, many who are sitting here tonight. Great to see you all. Right, it's easy to say we're spending too much, but if you look at any organization with 450 employees and you look at their administrative, their HR department, their payroll department, their accounts payable department, their this department, right? We have a handful of people doing all those things, and then the yeoman's work that's happening in the schools is a lot. So it is obviously a major budget driver, but I appreciate the fact that the committee has been really reticent to walk away from making sure that we have the ability to compensate and attract and retain the educators and staff that we need. So in this document, if I can just walk you through quickly, I'm not going to read it line by line. But starting on page 1, I should definitely put my glasses on. For each school, you will see that we included an increase in supplies. It's just the nature of the beast. We already don't have enough money for supplies. Many teachers are buying and staff are buying supplies out of their pocket, and so we needed to adjust those lines accordingly. The first line there, you see there's a transfer of a teacher from Salisbury to Newbury. That is purely attrition. That is not a cut. That is an outgoing grade level has a larger number of sections than an incoming grade level, and so we need one less section. There's a staff member that will transfer from Salisbury to Newbury that has larger. They have a large kindergarten going into first grade. The reality is that will be a transfer of funding, and with any year, there's retirements and resignations, and so it would be a new high over at Newbury. So just to make sure that first line there where it's an addition of a teacher at Newbury, it is not a cut at Salisbury. It is a one less section that's needed. The next big increase is down the first two lines at SES. There is a special educator and an IA. We're focusing on multilingual learning. Both of those have been funded through a grant. That grant is, we were understanding it was not coming back. There was a chance. It has been confirmed for us. It is definitely not coming back. So this budget assumes both of those roles, not new roles. Same people that are there today remain there next year. We have to absorb that cost in the general fund. Later on down, I'll tell you that IA cost is actually backed out. And then that teacher, where you see the $85,000 increase at Newbury, you see the decrease at Salisbury, because it's that funding for that extra position there. Again, supplies and services are inflated based on needs and actual costs through athletics. First, number 2 and number 4 under student services. I should say the second and fourth line under student services. There are no numbers, sorry. It is an addition of a speech and language assistant. This is the need. It's needed to deliver the services that are required via IEPs. So that is an addition. We've been trying to provide it in other ways. We are not able to meet the needs, so this budget includes a speech assistant half-time for the TLC program at Newbury. And then 2 lines down, it's actually for the REACH program at Pine Grove. We currently had an RBT that was funded. We weren't able to fill that. We were asking for another full-time RBT. Instead of that, it's a little less cost to make one full-time BCBA, and ultimately that would have one BCBA full-time for the REACH program at Pine Grove, one for the TLC program and programs at Newbury, and then one that would service students at the middle school in Salisbury, and there are no district programs that have that need at Salisbury. So that is still included, but those are additions. Over the page, on the backside, again, special ed supplies are increased based on need. Special education transportation, we'll talk about transportation again a little bit down there. We rebid our regular transportation contract, and that went up significantly. Special education is a combination of contract rates plus just the need and continuing to find more and more vendors that can provide the services because the needs continue to expand. Out-of-district tuition, there's a positive news there that it's a reduction of $308,000 based on students who are aging out and or coming back into the district. Professional development is moving money around between lines, so it's largely unchanged. This does include $50,000 there, the 4th year of the Chromebook plan. So we're all 1st, 5th, and 9th grade students get a new Chromebook. This will be the 4th iteration of that and will be fully funded so that moving forward, students get a new Chromebook in 1st grade, keep it for 4 years, get a new Chromebook in 5th grade through middle school, and then get a new Chromebook for high school. On leases, the most they have them is 4 years. Sometimes I think it's a stretch to get them to last 4 years, but that is the current plan. The Next one down is the transfer into the OPEB trust fund. That is, part of our capital plan. And certainly as we look to rebuild a middle school, high school, and we are going out to bond a potentially multi-$100 million building, the financial health of the district is going to mean real dollars to the towns when we go out to bond that cost, and they're paying the assessment. So that's the first of 2 years of phasing in OPEB contribution. There's a restructuring and adding an assistant facilities manager, as we've talked about with our new facilities manager, John Skinicki. Lots of great work, but there's definitely more need to make sure that we have an adequate understanding of all 600,000 plus square feet of building, and to make sure that we're maintaining it correctly, and not just this campus that we own, but also the 3 elementaries. Even though we don't own them, we have to make sure that we're taking responsibility to accurately plan and make sure that there is a plan for refresh and maintenance moving forward. Next thing included, there's front office staff and other market corrections that we haven't been able to do as we've settled other contracts over, I would say, over the last 3, 6, 9 years, that a lot of those front office administrative staff salaries have not been corrected. So there's a correction there. That's in the collective. Increase the community resource liaison an additional 10 hours. That is to offset some of the work that was being done by the wellness coordinator that you can see cut below. Student services, transportation, the 272 is regular transportation, increased cost. Facilities costs up 255,000. And then those are just general operating costs that are increasing, like everyone else's operating costs are increasing. And then that 1364 is the number of all of our insurance. So that includes health insurance, it includes general liability insurance, all of that. Obviously a major driver in this increase. Charter going up, a few more students at the charter schools, school choice going down. And then you can see the $1.183 million is the cost for all 4 bargaining units. The cost of COLAs and steps is just shy of $1.2 million. All non-union employees, same thing, COLAs, there are no steps outside of the bargaining units, is about $139,000. And then any of the column movement for all bargaining units moving horizontally is a total of $99,000. And then you can see below there, again, the number that we have been working on originally in the tentative budget, the increase was $2.625 million. The number that we're working with now that we believe is the right number as far as being affordable by the towns is 2.45. And you can see the reductions we've made. It's cutting the wellness coordinator. It's a reduction of 5 sections at the high school. They're unfilled sections right now. So that isn't a person that largely loses flexibility with scheduling when we don't have sections to move. As classes, students are doing course selection now, and it creates less flexibility. We had a student whose situation changed, $75,000 in savings for the out-of-district. We talked about negotiations with PEC for healthcare, targeting a $300,000 increase there. Circuit breaker, new revenue, that's where we are counting on that. That is not guaranteed, but that is the transportation component of circuit breaker. Up above, I talked about the EL multilingual assistant at Salisbury. That is coming back into the general fund. We will be keeping that IA, moving her into a different position, because we'll be able to provide the EL services with other EL licensed teachers. There are 30 students, I think that's the number, 30 students at Salisbury right now, and I think 34 or 35 at all other 4 schools combined. So we'll be pooling resources over at Salisbury to support that. And so that shows up as a savings, even though it was an increase, backs that out. And then down below, the last one there shows about $197,000 to combine the REACH and the Essentials and TLC program for the middle school, high school. We see this as definitely a 1 year, just based on the ages of the students, the population. We can see on the horizon students aging up. That will likely make this not possible, and we would have to move back to 2 separate programs. But next year with 2 retirements, we're able to not replace those 2 teachers for a year, run combined programs, and then likely next year at this time, we'll be talking about having to add 1 or both of those back. So the last line there shows 432,651, sorry, making sure my glasses, in undesignated cuts. So those have not been put on paper yet. We have certainly been spending a lot of time, we, the administrative team, leadership team, have been spending a lot of time talking about the least impactful way to make up those cuts. We haven't codified them fully because the reality is, back to where we started with Linda, in the process, if we find ourselves, it would be May 13th would be the soonest, which is when the election is and that override vote. If one of both of those override votes or town meeting votes fail, we'll know we don't have a budget and we're coming back to the drawing board. And that's cutting in addition to the 432,000. So that number is yet to be determined. We have time and some runway to figure that out. But in the interim, what we've been talking about is there are things like we currently have 19 bus runs running. And if you speak with any parent in Salisbury and Rowley specifically, we need 1 more bus. They are over full and rarely on time. But we could save about $155,000 by keeping it like it is and not restoring 2 runs. We've been trying to restore them for 2 years, haven't had the funding. I'm sorry, we haven't had they haven't been able to fill it. We could save a quick $155 there. There's certainly an impact, but it's the same as it is today. We talked about delaying curriculum adoption. We talked about whether those savings with healthcare could be more or less. There are some additions like the assistant facilities manager. Is this the right time to do that, pulling that out? And then again, depending on how large the cuts need to be, there aren't a whole lot, as the folks sitting in the audience know, there aren't a whole lot of other places to go in schools outside of direct impact on students. We talked about, is there an IA here and there? You know, there are some that we haven't been able to fill. It's an impact. Could we do it? Yes. We talked about at the elementary level, there are some sections or some grade levels in some schools where there's 4 classes or 4 sections per grade level. We could collapse that to 3. They become class sizes in the low 20s. Not ideal. At the middle school, it's really hard because if you remove 1 teacher, teams are out the window and impossible to do. Course load wise, it could happen. I don't know that we are ready to say we don't have a teaming structure at the middle school. I should say I'm not ready to say that. At the high school, it starts to take away breadth of programming and core classes get larger. And we also talked about specials, art, music, PE, library, and the fact that all of our specialists, again, art, music, PE, library, not math and literacy, a lot of them are dual licensed and providing interventions and a lot of added supports in those extra blocks that they have. And so certainly we would be able to deliver the same art, music, and library, art, PE, and library, but it would be deeply impactful on those 9 employees as far as their schedule. They'd be working in at least 2 buildings. And then there would be 1 part-timer that would go below half time and lose employee benefits, and it will be a near impossible position to fill. So no good answers, right? I mean, I think that's the reality, and so ultimately the question will be, certainly it's a public hearing to hear, but is the decision, are we cutting to the 432 tonight? Are we, or ultimately with the finalized budget next week? Or is it wait and see? Is it wait and see if it's deeper cuts? But that is a long-winded, and I apologize, explanation of where we're at now. And I just want to make sure, I think that's important for everyone here or at home, otherwise listening, to understand where we're at this moment, that 432 at this point is the best case scenario on the table, those additional cuts.
Thank you. The next is the guidelines for public hearings are listed in the agenda, and I will read them aloud. The committee will not engage in a discussion about the budget with those commenting, but will allow for any and all school and community members to provide feedback on the FY26 spending plan. Comments should last for no more than 3 minutes. The vice chair will indicate visually when you have 1 minute and then 30 seconds left in your speaking time. At the end of 3 minutes, I will politely interrupt so that we can ensure the process is fair for all other speakers. Speakers who have brought a prepared statement are requested to hand it to the committee secretary as part of the public record. That would be Paul Mayette here to my right. The school committee will review all comments and suggestions before approving the final budget on March 12, 2025. Please be sure to state your name and address clearly for the record to ensure the generation of accurate meeting minutes. So I would like to open the hearing for anyone who would like to come up.
Did you mention about the clipboard?
Oh, no, I did not. Write your name on the clipboard.
Yes. So if you can just write your name, there's a clipboard on the corner of this table. If it's easier, Dave, Mr. Williams is going to be the bravest. If we could maybe put the clipboard over on the side, and that might be easier than having to have people come up, put on the thing over there. And then if you can just state your name and make your comments. Do it again. Long.
Oh, it's just okay. I think I'm on now. My name is David Williams. Good evening. Thanks for the opportunity to speak tonight. My name is David Williams. I'm currently a 4th grade teacher, classroom teacher at Newbury Elementary School. And given the current budgetary concerns and the potential to need to make cuts somewhere, I'd like to advocate for our students and share some thoughts with you about the importance of maintaining smaller class sizes. Before I share my opinions, please indulge me. I want to say that I'm an expert in a moment, so I want to give you some background, some backstory. This is my 24th year in the district. I've taught 24 consecutive years, 3rd grade, 4th grade, 5th grade. I've taught in multi-age setups. I've looped. I've been self-contained. I've worked in a departmentalized team. I've collaborated with dozens of teammates and other educators, some of them here tonight, and I've been responsible for the education of hundreds of students. I've been to 6th grade camp over 20 times. I've had classes of 16 students. I've had a class once of 29 students. Mostly I've had numbers in between. My career to date is a little bit like a super extended field study of how education just keeps changing and morphing with all of these various other factors at play, class size being just one of them. But now I'm going to boldly claim that I'm an expert in what it feels like to be in a classroom. And one thing that I've learned from being in a classroom a lot is that smaller class sizes greatly benefit our students and improve the quality of their education. This isn't a philosophy thing. It's also not a data-supported conclusion, although research seems to back up benefits of smaller classes. This is more just a numbers game. The classroom's a place of finite resources. You've got limited space and limited materials and limited time, but you also have limited teacher energy and limited teacher focus. Every year, a new group of students enters the classroom. You have 180 days together. The first few weeks are heavy lifting. You're assessing needs and strengths. You're learning backgrounds and interests and passions. You're trying to keep individual needs and diverse personalities in mind while bringing together a community of learners that can function together day in, day out. You're trying, most importantly, to forge some kind of personal connection with students that gives some kind of depth and meaning to the whole enterprise. Finding the time and energy to do those things well and to ensure that all students know that you see them, that you know them individually, that you're committed to their personal growth, that's paramount. And that's where class size becomes paramount. This year, I have a reasonable class size. So I teach, I deliver curriculum, I chart growth, I communicate, I prepare reports, I have conferences, I build relationships, I do the juggling act. And because my class size is reasonable, though, I also find the time to go deeper. I can dig into this student's confusion with a science concept. I can have an impromptu conversation with that student about that new book series. I can brainstorm that troublesome friendship and perhaps what I can do about it. I can keep a running conversation going weeks on end with a student who needs to be challenged or supported. I can plan lessons that go beyond the have-tos and actually respond and relate to the specific individuals that are there in the room that year. I can build a real unique community, the kind of place that students want to spend their time and that they're excited to go to in the morning.
Mr. Williams, that's your time. Thank you.
Should we give it to Paul? Do you want to get his, I don't know if it's a written copy, but.
I was going to say, David, if you bring your written copy, that whole thing can be entered into the record.
We don't have a written copy because we're middle school teachers. We kind of
No, that's fine.
on the fly. Yes, I'll stand closer. My name is Jillian Beckwith, and I am an 8th grade science teacher at Triton Middle School.
I'm Allison Irvin, and I'm an 8th grade special education teacher, and I'm the team leader for our team at the middle school.
So it occurred to me when we were talking about putting the needs of the children first, how important teaming is here at the middle school. Allison and I are both teachers. We also live in the district, and our children go to our schools. And middle school, if any of you have kids who have gone through middle school or come out the other side, know how difficult a time it can be. And teaming is the ability to provide a little family, a little cushion within a pretty tumultuous time. Our kids are only with us for 7th and 8th grade, not 6th. They're still elementary. So they have a lot of learning, a big learning curve as we get them ready for high school. And teaming is not just about having a prep or a planning period. It's a part of our middle school culture. It makes us love where we work. It makes us have friendships with each other. And that makes sure that every child that is on our team feels like they've got a family of teachers behind them. And I know Allison's really great at that. I don't know if you want to say a couple words before we run out of time.
She just asked me to talk. I didn't know I was talking, so I have nothing prepared here. But like she said, sometimes at the middle school here, we're the smallest school and we get forgotten sometimes, but we play a big role. We bring them from the elementary, transition them to the high school. And if we give them the right tools and the right resources and the right independence, they can have success. And our data and the amount of impact that we can have on them really makes a big difference. 60 seconds, okay. She knows me well. And one of the things that if we do eliminate things, like one of the things that you talked about is collapsing some of the programs. Hi, special ed teacher here. So what that means is my caseload that's already 15 to 16, my caseload is going to go up into the 20s, give or take the numbers. I can handle that, absolutely. There's only so many hours in the day, though, so the more that gets taken away from us, the more wind comes out of our sails. And you can't take it out of our sails. We really need that. And I just implore you, I'm looking around I'm seeing a familiar parent from my son's basketball. Just keep in mind when all of this is coming to par, this is for the kids. This is not about the adults. Let's keep our agendas out and remember it's about the kids. Ultimately, at the end of the day, it's all about the kids. I pay the taxes too. Both of us do.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Erica Champagne. I'm a resident of Salisbury and the proud parent of 2 Triton students, a 6th grader at SES and a junior at the high school. And I'm also the co-chair of the Triton High School School Council. I come here tonight for two reasons. To implore the leaders of each of our member towns of the Triton Regional School District to fully fund this already slim district budget for FY26, and to advocate for district leaders in the school committee to not make any additional cuts to staffing or to programming specifically that supports arts and other non-core curricular areas across the district. At a time when federal education funding is unpredictable at best, it is more important than ever for residents across Massachusetts, the birthplace of our nation's public education system, to dig deeper into our pockets to fund our schools. This is especially true for member towns and regional school districts where declining enrollment and inadequate state funding formulas and processes are negatively impacting our finances. Our Triton students deserve a robust educational experience. To ensure that is realized, a fully funded budget that provides adequate staffing, many of them here tonight, to support the delivery of not only core curriculum, but also the arts, STEM, physical education, and library services is essential. The staff that teach our children every day deserve more from us as a school community than notices of possible termination due to budget restrictions. Our teachers, driven by passion and commitment to educate our children, deserve to be well compensated and secure in their jobs. Regarding the arts and other non-core curricular programming, we all know that since COVID, our nation's children are struggling with mental health, social and emotional wellness, and we're having high chronic absenteeism rates across the country. Access to and participation in programming for the arts, STEM, phys ed, and clubs are all linked by data and research to increases in sense of belonging, overall wellness, and the development of important life skills for kids. Triton has a thriving arts department thanks to the concerted efforts of staff and students rebuilding it over the past 5 years. The program offers opportunities that connect the 3 elementary schools, the middle school, and the high school, bringing us closer together as a community and as a district. Let's not take this lifeline away from our kids when they need it the most, especially if the wellness coordinator position is being cut in the most recent iteration of the budget. In closing, to the residents and the leaders of our member towns, please do what is necessary to fully fund Triton's proposed budget for FY26. If overrides are deemed necessary, please vote in favor. To our state legislators, please continue to advocate for better funding for our district at the state and federal levels, and to our school committee members and to our district leaders, please be considerate of the impact any planned budget cuts may have on arts, STEM, library, and PE teachers and the programs that they deliver. These staff and services are essential to the education our kids deserve. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Leslie Curran. I am a resident of Newbury. I have 2 children at NES. I'm also an educator. I didn't prepare a statement, but I'm here to please beg you not to go beyond the 432,000 cuts that are proposed, and to give you some hope in the idea that we can get overrides passed. The idea that I want to second everything Mr. Williams said about class size. Maintaining small class sizes is so important. The idea of touching any of the non-core curricular classes, library, art, music, PE, any of that is kind of unimaginable to me, to think of my kids growing up in a school environment where they don't have those on a regular and daily basis. And I guess I'm, as a parent, here to say that I would fight like heck to get an override passed in my town and the and in the nearby town. And whether it's, organizing not just parents, right, but helping the community see that investing in schools is not just the job of parents, but of the entire community, and that it's absolutely worth every penny and more, and hopefully helping people understand that when our schools are better and thriving, that attracts more people to the town. It makes our community more desirable as a place to live. It raises property values, that it's a positive feedback loop, and that making more and more and more cuts is not going to strengthen our community in any capacity, including economically. And so I would I guess I'm here to give you hope that there are families out there that are wanting to pass an override, that are willing to do the work to try to get that passed and to do the organization. And so please don't already jump to the next step of, well, that's not going to happen, and let's just like already start making the cuts. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Scott Weil. I am a resident of Newbury. I also have 2 kids in the district. And I appreciated Brian mentioning how the $2.45 million increase is not a small number. I would agree with that. I think anyone would. By my calculations, I tried to do it before based on last year's budget, I think that's about a 4.6% increase, which sounds high. However, I think it's the cost of doing business. We're in unfortunately, a situation right now where inflation has been high for years, about 3 to 8% nationally for the past 4 years. And I would argue in Massachusetts, we're probably looking at rates higher than that in terms of the cost of living. The schools aren't immune to that. So I think that, as I said, this is the cost of doing business. Costs are high, and to keep our high quality of education, I would support an override to try to maintain that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, everybody. My name is Brett Alger. I live on Pearson Drive, resident in Newbury. I have 2 kids in Newbury Elementary. I'm also the vice president of the Newbury PTA. I was not going to get up here until my good friend Leslie, who I've known for a long time, got up here and said a few words, and I think she touched on something really important. Quick background, my dad was a teacher, a coach, assistant principal, athletic director. He was my high school principal. He was a superintendent in my school district. I appreciated these issues from when I was a little kid. And really what it comes down to, it's a numbers game. All the line items that you're all discussing are really important. All the people behind me and that are listening and all their stories, I don't need to go on. But this is a numbers game. And as part of being the vice president of the PTA, I've already let them know that I'll be communicating with the other 2 elementary schools and their PTAs and making sure that there's a lot of information and public awareness of what's happening. And I've also been in touch with the select board about reimagining and revisiting how we make the annual town meeting more accessible to families. I don't think it's fair and equitable that we take votes in windowless rooms 9 or 10 o'clock at night on these important issues. And so I will be doing everything that I can to make sure that parents and young families have an opportunity to show up and have their voices heard. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hi, my name's Daryl Kwiatkowski. I'm one of the speech pathologists here at Newbury, and I'm also a resident of Byfield on Orchard Street, 143 Orchard Street, for the past 28 years. And even though I'm a speech pathologist, I'm very nervous speaking in front of you all. I do it for a living, but not this. But I just felt like after listening to the comments so far, and especially David Williams touching on the idea of, possibly larger class sizes. I've worked at Newbury I'm closing in on 19 years, and I would just have to tell you from firsthand experience that the quality of the child in terms of social emotional needs is unbelievable. It's nothing like I've ever seen. I know COVID obviously had a role in that, I'm sure, but just the world in general, I don't know what's going on, but the needs of these children, I see them struggling in the classrooms, in the hallways, and we do our best with that. So the idea of increasing the number of children in a classroom, to me, it just doesn't make sense to me, because they will have less of a relationship with their teachers. The teachers are doing their best with that. We all are doing our best, but if there are less people to help them and feel connected to and have those go-to people in their environment, and then I foresee those children not being able to even stay in the district, some of them. And then you're talking about losing money with out-of-district placement. So I know as speech pathologists and a therapist and we do try to save the district money by keeping really difficult, not difficult, but challenging children with their needs and their levels that they need and support. So I just see that this is another area that if we can just keep the classroom sizes where they are, that would be at least one small step in trying to keep that social emotional relationship and bonds going. And I do live here, like I said, in Byfield, and I've been wanting for years to pay more in taxes. I think we get away with way too low, and I would do everything as well to help get that. So I feel like we should at least try to maintain the proposed budget that you've got. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else that would like to address the committee?
Hi, my name is Amanda Weejay Singer. I work at Newbury Elementary. I live in Salisbury. This is my first year here in this district. I spent the past 11 years in an urban district that was very large, 15 elementary schools, 3 middle schools, 3 high schools, and class sizes of about 29 kids. I did special education there. We had very limited resources, and so when I came here, it was like a breath of fresh air. It felt like the students were actually going to be able to get what they deserved and needed, and it has been like a complete 180. I have seen such a stronger sense of community, the morale between staff, like people are kind and happy to be at work. That does not happen when the needs of the students cannot be met. And so I've seen with bigger class sizes and even like 4 clinicians in an elementary school with class sizes of like 28, and we're talking K to 5, not even pre-K to 6, still not meeting the needs of what's happening right now. And so I think to further cut anything from the schools that we have already would just be really detrimental. And it would be really disappointing because there is so much great stuff happening here. So thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. There we go. Hi, I'm Jennifer Brown, and I'm the Library Media Specialist at Newbury Elementary School, and wasn't planning on speaking, but here I am. I just wanted to provide just a maybe really brief picture of what it is like to be a specialist in the elementary schools in the Triton District. First of all, it's an honor and a pleasure and a joy. We see 8 grade levels, pre-K through grade 6. And for PE, library, art, and music, we are building a curriculum each and every week for our students. And I'm trying to imagine, excuse me, this, as you're thinking of the budget, and I get the gravity of it, and you're thinking of the students, and you're thinking of the district, and you're thinking of the staff, and I can't imagine how you're juggling this and thinking, as everyone's coming up here, what you're going to do. But from the specialist point of view, we are seeing all the students, and I'm trying to imagine what it's going to look like being in 2 different schools. Or we have just great teams within Newbury Elementary School, a phenomenal specialist team amongst my library media specialists at all 3 schools, really top-notch people that I would hate to see juggled around, shuffled, or to lose. And so with that, I just wanted to provide sort of that little insight. I think sometimes we're a spot on the schedule, but we see each and every student, and we're able to see them grow from pre-K to grade 6. And again, it's a great honor to be able part of their education journey for that long. And certainly we invite you, and I certainly invite you into the library, and I'm sure the specialists would invite you into our spaces to see what our programs do each and every day and each week. So with that, thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Jessica Decker, and I'm a special education teacher at Newberry Elementary School. I appreciate all of you listening and hearing us speak about how much we enjoy teaching, how important it is in our lives, and how we want to touch the students' lives in a positive and caring, kind way. I'd just like to share a little story about the teachers and how the teachers can impact the lives of the students. And just piggybacking on what many of the people behind me have said about small class sizes, keeping the classes the way they are, and not increasing them by having that budget go beyond what it already currently is. Every year in sixth grade, at the end of the year, we have our sixth graders write letters to teachers in our district, in our school, that have impacted them. And every year, it is the most exciting part of our curriculum because they get to write a letter to their teacher and talk about how that teacher has impacted them, how that teacher has influenced them, how that teacher has made them love school or helped them out of a situation that they were struggling with. And that teacher has stayed with them through their whole time at Newberry Elementary School. The students will write letters to their first grade teacher, their second grade teacher. Some write letters to actually teachers in other districts if they were a move-in. Multiple students will write to teachers and their specialists, so library and media, PE, music, teachers that have touched their lives in a way that has made such an impact on them. And I encourage the district and the people within these communities to just remember that teachers aren't just teachers. We are parents sometimes to these students. We're counselors to these students. We're people that provide laughter that maybe they don't get. People that listen to them, I mean, really listen to them. And I just want to say that every person in this school, in these schools, these teachers are very important to the lives of the students. And that makes them want to be here, makes them be happy, and it's their safe place. So I would encourage the district and the people in all of the surrounding communities to make sure that the budget is passed. So thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. I am Rachel DeFieri, and I am an IA in the Essentials program at Pine Grove. Tonight you've heard mostly from specialists and from the teachers, but we're also part of the teams. A lot of the teachers wouldn't be able to do majority of the things that they do if we weren't there to help them. And if you're cutting a lot of that, that's more on their plate, and that's going to be harder on not only them, their families, the kids, everyone else in this building. We take so much off majority of the teachers by being there for them and being there for the kids. And I know some either staff, teachers think the IAs sometimes are just bodies. We help the kids with everyday things. It could be as simple as just being their friend, getting them to do their homework, or getting them to talk to the friend that they haven't been able to talk to. I couldn't imagine not being with the kids that I'm with every day and in fear of being replaced by something or having them go somewhere else. They make our entire days. And working with the staff that we have, it just makes it that much better. But hopefully you guys take that also into consideration. But thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else that would like to address the committee? Anybody that has spoken, if you could please make sure that you're putting your name on the clipboard, just so that we have accurate minutes of everybody's and their correct names. I want to thank everybody for being here tonight, and I want to thank you all for coming to advocate for the district. We have great staff and students here, and I appreciate you all being here. Can I have a motion to close the public hearing for the fiscal year 2026 district budget?
Are you reading aloud Chris's statement?
Huh? Oh, yeah, that's right. Chris Nealon from the Rowley Select Board has sent in a letter that they would like me to read. We have relayed our concerns. This is from Sherry David and Chris Nealon from the Rowley Select Board. Sherry and I have recently met with both Senator Tarr and Representative Kastner on several occasions. We have relayed our concerns with both legislators regarding regional transportation, state Chapter 70 funding, Triton's 2026 budget impact to Rowley, potential Prop 2.5 overrides for Rowley for year 26 and 27, Triton's acceptance into the MSBA, Whittier Regional Technical High School and their acceptance into the MSBA, Whittier's potential 2026 budget for Rowley, Whittier's potential capital assessment to the towns, the Whittier Regional 58-year-old agreement within the 11 communities, and the selection of a new Rowley Whittier School Committee member. Both legislators appeared to have heard us and the potential financial impact all of this will have on the town of Rowley. Therefore, both Vice Chair David and I will not be in attendance this evening. And if anybody has any, if me or Brian have any concerns, to give them a call, and they wanted this to be read into the record. So may I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to close the public hearing on the fiscal year 2026 Triton Regional School District budget.
I'll second.
Can I have a roll call vote? Erin?
Yes.
Kelly?
Yes.
Caitlin?
Yes.
Paul Goldner?
Yes.
Matt?
Yes.
Marissa?
Yes.
Paul Mayette?
Yes.
And I'm a yes as well. So we will take a moment, 5-minute recess so we can have the state legislators come on.
think they're all set. I think they're good. I think they're good.
Okay, I would like to thank Senator Tarr and Reps Kastner and Shan for coming tonight, and I appreciate your patience. Our budget situation, like so many other school districts this year, is a difficult one on the expenses side, as you've heard. Triton relies on a variety of sources for revenues, including the federal, state, and local governments, and it seems likely at this point that both Newbury and Raleigh will be asking their voters to pass overrides to fund their budgets. While we are grateful for every dollar, Triton's estimated Chapter 70 increase based on the governor's budget proposal would be $156,900, a 1.68% increase over the current year. Triton is a declining enrollment district, but student loss is distributed across the schools and grades and does not immediately allow for the reduction of costs. It takes years to see gradual savings, and in the meantime, the district is seeing double-digit percentage increases this year in many different line items. I'm hoping you can provide some insight on the state budget outlook for this year for us as we negotiate our local budget and also some of the things that you're working on. So I'd like to hand it over to whomever would like to start first.
I'll get us started. So, first of all, we're always happy to have the conversation, and we appreciate, once again, being able to come and talk to you about this. As you alluded to, we are at the very beginning of the budgeting process for the coming fiscal year. Governor Healy has filed her budget proposal, which, as you indicated, provides about a $157,000 increase. And that increase points to one of the issues that will continue to haunt us until we were able to change the paradigm. And that is that we are continuing to be a minimum per pupil aid district. And so we have all collectively fought to increase the amount of minimum per pupil aid over the last several years, and we reached a high water mark over the last couple of years at about $104 a student. But the problem is, while we argue around the margins about whether that minimum aid number is going to be $30 per pupil or $75, which is the number that the governor uses in her budget, or $104, the point is we are not going to be able to make the gains that we need to make to close the gap that we need to close between what our districts need and what we're able to provide. And so, once again, we have a situation where this proposal does not change the foundation budget formula, does say to over 200 school districts in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts that you are going to get minimum per pupil aid. And by the way, if you didn't get minimum per pupil aid because of declining enrollment, in a number of these cases, you'd be getting a cut. So minimum per pupil aid is intended to prevent a backslide of even larger proportion than there would otherwise be. So one of the things that we often talk about is the fact that the state will, one way or the other, in this budget commit significant amounts of new money for Chapter 70 funding. And in fact, the governor in her budget would provide an additional $420 million in Chapter 70, which is roughly a 6.1% increase. But here's the issue, and we've talked about this before. Until we are able to make a foundational change in the foundation budget, we can pour very large amounts of money into the top of the formula, and what gets to local school districts that are minimum aid districts is very little. And that's very frustrating for us because oftentimes folks will read the newspaper and they'll read a headline that will say, we're going to increase Chapter 70 by 6.1%. It's $420 million. And you say, well, how can that be? We're getting $157,000. And that points to the nature of the problem. And as we have discussed many times in the past, what we oftentimes do as suburban legislators is try to find things that don't run through that formula. So, for instance, we try to make sure that the circuit breaker for SPED is maximized because we don't have a disadvantage in that formula. We try to maximize regional school transportation for the very same reason. And in fact, the good news in the governor's budget proposal is it reimburses regional school transportation at 95%, which should not even be an issue because the statute says 100%, but 95% would be the best number we've seen in a while. So we're very appreciative of that. And the special education circuit breaker, it increases the funding by about $132 million. So we think that we would be at roughly the 75% that statutorily we're supposed to deliver. So if you look at that budget, and you look at the issues that we're dealing with, you see minimum per pupil aid, we actually would go backward in that budget. Regional school transportation, we actually do pretty well. And special education circuit breaker, we pretty much hold our own. So then the question becomes, well, what happens as this moves through the legislative process? Well, the House will debate the budget in April, and the Senate will debate the budget in May. And the goal is to have a final budget to the governor so that it can be signed in time for the beginning of the new fiscal year in July. So then the next logical question is, okay, how much can change between now and then? How much are we locked into what we're seeing here? And one of the challenging things for us this year is going to be, for lack of a better word, a stagnation in state revenue. So if you look at the governor's budget proposal, it increases over the current fiscal year by somewhere between 2.4 and 2.5%. Real dollars, that's about 880 million, 900 million, maybe $1 billion if things go well. But think about that, $1 billion over all of state government. Now, one of the things that we need to account for here is you'll see some reports that the budget is increasing by 7.4%. That increase is attributable to accounting for the so-called millionaire's tax. And we are very limited in what we can apply those proceeds to. So when you see the larger number, you'll say, well, don't you have some more flexibility? And with regard to those funds, we don't necessarily. Now, we could have a conversation about that, but we don't necessarily. So the budget itself is increasing by a relatively small amount. So it's going to make it hard, and we're going to be back in the situation again of trying to fight for a minimum per pupil aid increase, hopefully to get us back to at least the $104. Now, anyone who's followed this conversation knows that every year I file for much larger increases, going up to as much as $200 per student. And I think it's important to fight that fight. But even if those were successful, they still would not get us to where we need to be. And so I'm going to apologize to my colleagues for this monologue, but I'm going to go just a little bit further. I do not see us being able to get out of this problem unless and until we can change the foundation budget. And you may recall that many of us fought for, and my colleagues were not here for this, but we fought to reconstitute the Foundation Budget Review Commission back 2015, 2016, and it happened. And the unfortunate thing was the Foundation Budget Review Commission, and by the way, I amended the Student Opportunity Act, so it must happen now every 10 years. But it needs to happen right now. But anyway, putting it aside for the moment, that Foundation Budget Review Commission looked at half of the problem. It looked at the proposition of whether or not the formula properly determines the amount of money that is needed to educate a student according to the laws and the mandates that we provide. And it essentially confirmed what we knew. It did not. There was a wide disparity, and part of that was because we hadn't reviewed it essentially since we passed the original law in 1993. So armed with that information, we began developing the Student Opportunity Act. And the Student Opportunity Act was important. It did a lot of important things. But what it did not do, and what the Foundation Budget Review Commission did not do, was look at the other half of the equation. How do we pay for it? How do we treat communities fairly? And how do we make sure that there's no disparity between like communities in what they have to contribute to the cost of education? Now, this is always an opportunity for me to just give a little bit of a plug. The victory that we had in the Student Opportunity Act, which helped a very small percentage of school districts, they tended to be urbanized districts, and they have their share of issues, and they needed help. But when we asked the North Shore Superintendent's Roundtable, who played an incredibly strong leadership role in this discussion, one of the things that we were told is that while our enrollment is declining, the complexity of our student body is increasing. And the cost of special education, because it is growing, creates a situation where we have increased cost even in the face of declining enrollment. So what we're able to do is modify the Student Opportunity Act and bring in to the circuit breaker the cost of sped transportation. That was the victory for suburban school districts. And if it wasn't for the North Shore Superintendent's Roundtable and their work, we would not have gotten that. And I can say that to you without reservation, and it will make a difference. But what we need to do now, is reconstitute the Foundation Budget Review Commission and look at the other half of the formula. And we need to do it right now. Because in a year or two, the Student Opportunity Act will be fully implemented. And yet we will still have revenue growth from year to year, and we need a plan for where we're going to put that money. And it needs to be in addressing the disparities that you were just hearing about and discussing before we sat at this table. So over the last several years, again, I have offered the language to recreate the Foundation Budget Review Commission consistently, and we have not been able to get that legislation passed. However, lo and behold, this year, my friend and colleague, who the chair of the Education Committee on the part of the Senate, who has opposed me in floor debate on this issue, has filed a bill to reconstitute the Foundation Budget Review Commission. I have filed a bill as well. And we have agreed to work together to see if we can move this on the part of the Senate and spend at least $250,000 for the work of that commission so that we can do the work that we need to do to set the stage for the kind of change that we need. Now, I know everyone around this table is going to say, we need the help immediately. We know that. But in order to get there, we've got to lay this foundation. So we will work very, very hard to do what we can within the paradigm that we're in right now to maximize resources, but we will also work very, very hard to change the paradigm. Because if we don't, we'll be having this conversation into perpetuity. And so I'm going to breathe. From my perspective, that's where we're at.
Thank you, Senator Todd.
I'm going to take us in a slightly different direction. And I'll be brief, because I'm not going to be as interesting as Senator Tar. So there are many conversations going on in the building about education. And I will say the Senate is also leading a very good conversation about inflation. The fact is that you're behind. You know, even though there has been growth, I think you've seen at least 8% inflation in services, salaries, everything. So I think inflation is something that we're going to really have to take a strong look at in this budget as we move forward. Another conversation is, of course, what is the graduation requirement? The governor did announce that she's put together some kind of commission But I think Desi's quite worried about being sued, a class action suit about what does it mean to graduate from a school in Massachusetts. There are always conversations about what do we want our kids to learn? What would prepare them best for the future? So of course, everybody has an idea about how they want the curriculum to change. It's everything from we should be offering American Sign Language, financial literacy as a course, and computer science. Now, computer science is near and dear to my heart. And one of the bills put forward that I'm going to be working on is about micro-credentialing so that we have more people who can teach computer skills. You know, we have a lot of conversations on Beacon Hill about building intergenerational wealth, but I think one amazing way is to give children an education that allows them to graduate and earn $100,000 from day one. So, you know, computer science is just not something that the curriculum is robust in this state. So I will be working on that. And of course, that also, we have to think about Whittier. You know, and I know that's going to make the quiet pall will now descend upon the conversation. I have filed a bill to study, asking DESE to study the financing of our Chapter 74 vocational school improvements. So separating the fact that they treat a vocational school like an elementary school, and also to take a look at how we're asking communities to go out and campaign for these huge overrides. If you go to OCPF and you look up Yes for Whittier, there's only one entry, and it's for a fairly small amount. So we really don't know who funded the initiative. We don't know how the expenses were doled out. And it really allowed a narrative to set in the Whittier campaign that the only people who wanted this to pass were the builders and the unions who would build this huge school. And that wasn't necessarily fair, but it kind of played out in how the campaign worked. So we really want to take a look at that and make sure that communities are set up so that they're not going forward and trying to campaign for $500 million when they don't have the wherewithal or the knowledge to really successfully go to the communities and ask for that kind of money. So those are my initiatives, and I am now going to turn it on to Kristen, who has a much better and more interesting talk about the budget.
I don't know about that, but I'm happy to be here. So thank you, Senator Tarr, for giving us the foundation of where we are, and it's very, very helpful. I think we were encouraged by seeing the budget numbers in the H1 budget from the governor. We were encouraged to see at least start at 75 instead of 30 for this per student. So, and you know, we'll be fighting to get to 104 or getting to 200 along the way, as well as regional transportation, as every single year we talk about. I filed a bill with Representative Scarsdale to get at that, making sure that we actually appropriate that amount, that percentage, the required percentage to regional transportation, not say, you know, yes, we're going to do it, and then the appropriation runs short, as we saw with circuit breaker for out-of-district special ed transportation, which we're hoping that we'll see something come up that we can remedy and really get communities to the 75% reimbursement instead of what we're seeing as more as 44 at this point. But just really making sure that if we're making the commitment to a certain percentage, that we're honoring that commitment and reimbursing and appropriating the right amount of funding for those issues. So, and I also, let's see, those are my main highlights. But just in general, I mean, so many of our communities are this hold harm, what is it, 200, it was 211, now it's 230 plus. And this kind of hold harmless stuck where there's all these levers to pull that make a difference in funding and how much you get. But when you're stuck in this kind of hold harmless, the levers don't make a difference. And how can we be helpful in that conversation so we can move a little bit forward? And it's not, oh, well, you're all over here, so yeah, that enough of, you know, we understand these things might make a difference, but because we're in this position, not as much so. So anyway, I think the one thing that's super important for us is to hear from all of you and really hear what's happening on the ground. Is it working? I mean, there's a lot of good ideas that are put forward in a lot of bills, and they need to work. And I think we try our best to make sure they do work. But, even if we thought they were great and perfect when we passed them, we can see how things roll out. And I agree with the senator in terms of and I'm very encouraged with Senator Lewis and to bring up the Foundation Budget Review Commission this year as we're coming to the final years of the SOA. The fastest we can do things is right now, and so I think it's great that at least there's a little bit more momentum there. I think hopefully there'll be some more momentum in the House, but I mean, all of our communities up here are small communities, small government, small professional staff, and really, really tight budgets. And there's not, a lot to cut. I mean, we have just, I'm amazed with how much that you guys are doing with kind of what we have. So thank you for that, and we'll do our best to get these numbers as high as we can get them with the current structure and the structure that isn't quite working for us. Make sure that we can hear from you and modify where we need to modify and have a voice for you in the discussion, whether it's a budget this year, the Foundation Review Committee, and moving forward. But just always, if I don't know, I don't know, and I can advocate best for you if I do. So thanks some of you. I talked to some of you a lot more than others, but anyone who has concerns about kind of how things are working on the ground, the more we know, the better we can advocate. So thank you.
I want to thank you guys for being here. You guys are always willing to come and have this conversation. I would just like to share with you some of the bills our Policy and Advocacy Subcommittee has identified that we would ask you to support. Some of them you have already touched upon, so please forgive me when I repeat it. As well as potential Triton impacts from the requests being made through Project 211+21, which is what Rep. Kastner has said, a coalition of a variety of educational policy associations. I know the Policy and Advocacy Subcommittee is preparing a letter to you about the bills at next week's meeting, but I wanted to identify a few trends while you are here. One of the more urgent ones would be for remote meetings, which will not be allowed as of the end of this month. Triton uses remote meetings for our subcommittees frequently, allowing them to meet at times that would not be possible in person due to travel, and our facility subcommittee employed them extensively last fall to reduce consultant costs by avoiding travel fees. The full committee also uses them occasionally for short meetings so that our members aren't driving an hour for a half-hour meeting. We find that they also often draw more members of the public than our in-person meetings due to their accessibility.
So no one mentioned this, and I would just personally love to know, just because this is right around the corner for us, and we have multiple subcommittees that sort of rely on remote meetings. I can say our finance subcommittee, which sort of struggles to meet. Kelly is usually zooming in from work. Paul is usually zooming in from work. And we're able to meet during their work days because we're all coming in from these all different places, right? And it wouldn't work if we have to drive there. So I was just curious if we could just pause there before we go back to sort of budget type stuff. And I don't know if you have any insight. I know there's a few bills filed. I believe it's in the Empower Act, Municipal Empowerment Act. I don't know if you have any information, but we would be all ears because as of the 31st, we're getting shut off.
So this is very near and dear to my heart of being as a municipal employee for so long, and I don't know how we could function without a hybrid meeting format. So there are a couple bills. The bill filed by Rep. Gregoire and Senator Oliveira seems to be the one that is most like how things are right now. So at least I'm having the conversations and have written a letter about either this, I mean, it's March 31st is right around the corner, to at least extend where we are, just if we haven't figured it out, because we haven't had hearings on some of these bills already, but we need to make sure no matter what, to make sure, it's hard enough to have governance in local communities with so many elected boards and commissions, and you don't have, and it's been, communities have been able to have meetings on the same night at the same time, and there's just not a, I mean, if you had to go back to regular meetings, just room scheduling is difficult. So never mind inconvenience of the membership. So it's something that I'm certainly talking to a lot of people about. I spoke with Mass Municipal Association this week about their advocacy, as well as Metropolitan Area Planning Council and Merrimack Valley Planning Council, on just to, like, what can we do to make sure that this happens. There has been some discussion that if it was an extension, potentially it could be informal, maybe not formal, but I think there is a definitely growing awareness of that we need to act on this very quickly. And I don't know about you guys, but I'm getting 25 emails at a minimum every day on this topic to make sure that we take action. So I appreciate you bringing it up. And it is something. And the other thing I just wanted to say that I didn't say when I was speaking was, we're so happy that you guys are in the MSBA process, and whatever we can do through that process, please reach out and let us know. So thank you.
Thank you.
So I would just say quickly, first of all, I'm really glad you brought it up because the timeline is approaching quickly. I think generally on Beacon Hill, there's a lot of support for this idea. As you may know, we're just in the process of forming committees as we speak. And so trying to get a standalone bill moving is going to be difficult, if not impossible, by that deadline. So I think it's also a question of finding a vehicle. So if we were to have a supplemental spending document or something else that we had to move quickly, I think that's where you might find at least an extension. But I do think there's a lot of support for the idea.
Thank you.
So for funding, the bills on regional transportation and special education would be helpful. These are significant costs in our budget and seem to always have large increases compared to our other budget lines. There are multiple bills filed that would further examine the Chapter 70 formula, specifically the component that looks at the ability of municipalities to pay towards education. We believe this component affects our towns negatively due to their rural and coastal aspects, and we would hope this will be considered. Bill SD 1237 should shift the cost of education off towns and onto the state by about 5%. This would not directly affect Triton's state funding by our calculations, but it would move us closer to getting our out-of-hold harmless status, and it would limit the effect that the formula has on our town assessments. Even if Triton's budget did not increase $1 this year, Rowley would have seen a $240,000 increase over last year, in part due to the large impact of this part of the formula on town assessments. For small towns like Rowley, changes like that without no difference in the district budget presents a hurdle before even starting to take into account contractual cost increases. We believe that we owe our students the skills they need to succeed in life, even if the state doesn't require it. And one specification we put in place for graduation is learning about personal finance. Funding for training and materials to that end would be helpful. We appreciate your support for our recent application to the MSBA for a school building project partnership. And with the rising cost of construction, the bill's boosting MSBA reimbursements and providing funding would likely benefit Triton during this work. Project 2, go ahead.
I'm the worst. I apologize. This is the way all our meetings go. I'm sort of the, I don't know, interrupter over here. I just wanted to add, I guess, one thought onto this, and I think Senator Tar, you brought it up earlier, but I just wanted to say, I think when we're talking about looking at those components of the foundation budget formula, especially the ability to pay, one of the things that's happening with the Student Opportunity Act is that as more money is coming in from the state, the towns, or the cities in that case, are forced to sort of match it. it's not affecting us a whole lot because of the way we act in the formula. But those towns that are receiving, in some cases, $1,600, $1,700 per pupil right now, their local contribution is being forced up significantly because of that. That, assuming that the funding schedule stays sort of on track with the schedule it's on, is supposed to end in fiscal year 27. So I think this is, to go beyond your point, sort of this is the year, because it's not just the hold harmless districts that are sort of feeling the pressure right now. It is the districts that are getting a ton of funding pumped into them. They are also feeling the pressure right now. And that's probably going to ease off after fiscal year 27, when the money that's being pushed through the Student Opportunity Act is likely going to level off. So I just wanted to, like, if that can happen, please, this is the year to make that happen, because I think there's a limited window to get that done.
I agree, and I really do think we're reaching critical mass, and it's been a very long time. And you and I have been talking about this for years, and I hate to repeat it, but I really do think it's the only path, and I think we're gaining momentum.
Excellent. If there's anything we can do to help, let us know. I know Linda's was about to launch into Project 211 plus 21, which is something that in the district we've been hearing a lot about. I'm sure she'll talk about it, but it's essentially all of those hold harmless districts that are really feeling that same pain coming together. And I think it's really encouraging to see all those different groups sort of allying behind this idea. So if there's anything that we can either push on our own here locally, obviously we had a lot of staff here tonight, I think it behooves us all to take advantage of this opportunity while we have it. So where we can marshal forces, please use us.
So as she had mentioned, Project 211 plus 21 came into being last year as Project 211, named for the 211 districts in Mass who are in hold harmless status and receiving only per pupil minimum aid through Chapter 70. This year, 21 new districts moved into hold harmless, and the coalition now includes Massachusetts Association of Regional Schools, Massachusetts Association of School Superintendents, Massachusetts Association of School Business Officials, the Massachusetts branch of the American Federation of Teachers, and the Massachusetts Teachers Association. They have put together a number of asks, and I wanted to quantify the best I could the potential impacts of some of those proposals. Unfortunately, we don't have the numbers yet that would be used to calculate most of those for next year. So I'm using the most recent numbers I have to estimate the changes over the current levels. Increase in circuit breaker tuition reimbursement to 90% would be about $225,000 increase for Triton. Bringing circuit breaker transportation to 75% would be an increase of $240,000. An increase in regional transportation to 100% would increase $145,000 to Triton. Minimum aid for 75 per pupil in the governor's budget to 104 would be about $60,000 increase for Triton. Most of the others are either negligible or very difficult to forecast. Anything you can do to assist funding this would be tremendously helpful for Triton. And right now, as you mentioned, Senator Tarr, there's only a few areas that will affect us immediately. And those are the three things that would affect us immediately. And they're not going to give us big amounts of money, but any cent we can get this year is going to be helpful for us.
Those figures are actually very helpful, and I'm hoping you can share them with us in an email.
Absolutely.
But I can assure you that this legislative delegation will be hard at work on all of those variables that we can move the needle on to be able to make a difference.
Yeah. I mean, this year is one of the toughest years that I've seen in all the years I've been on the school committee. And seeing the amounts of the assessments to our three towns, it's just not sustainable for them. So going forward in future years, it's going to be very difficult to do what we need to do to help our staff and students to be successful. You have anything else?
I mean, I think the only other thing that's kind of sitting on my brain, as I'm sure it's sitting on all of ours, is federal funding and what happens if that starts falling through. Some of our programs are a federal to a state path through. Some of them are federal dollars complemented by state dollars. I know it's going to be extremely difficult for the state to compensate if some of those get cut off. I didn't know if you had any insight or if there's anything you're preparing on. I mean, I'm just looking at, we just got to the point of being able to provide universal school meals, which is so important. We've opened up food pantries in all of our schools now because there is so much need for our students. And being able to provide universal school meals to every student that walks in the door was not only tremendous to be able for them to have food, but it was also a great equalizer because it wasn't, this separate group, right, that sort of got this different treatment. It put everybody on the same playing field, and sometimes perception amongst kids is just, it can make it or break it, right? And it was one of the things that I think, as far as recent developments on the state side, I saw so much promise in it. And I know maybe it doesn't make it back to you because it's not, like a new sexy gadget or whatever it happens to be, something you can take a photo opportunity with, or you can easily quantify or something like that and put it in reporting. But I mean, I think the impact on students was just so profound. And that's one of the things I personally would hate to see walked back if we don't have to. Like I said, I don't know if you have any insight. You're probably as, glued to news as we are.
I do want to address this. Universal school meals was the great victory of the budget when I came into the building. It is funded through the millionaire's tax. That's not going away. And I think there is a real commitment in Massachusetts that we do not roll back our values at this point in time. And that is a fundamental value, equity in the school system.
And I agree, we do receive federal funding for Salisbury Elementary, right, through CEP?
So we were just talking about that. We have about 1.8 million between IDEA, which is in the vicinity of about $750,000, Title I, we about 350 now-ish, 360 something, and then various other ASOST 21st century. There is federal funding from USDA on the universal meals as well that the state is backfilling. There's people talking about that going away. So there is definitive money that we get directly. Obviously, we receive the dollars, as you said, as a pass-through from DESE, but those would certainly be quite impactful.
I think it is our goal and our obligation as leaders not to panic.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
We don't know what's going to happen.
So I would echo that sentiment completely. I mean, it seems like if there's one thing that illustrates or characterizes Washington right now, it's uncertainty. And we're all on a roller coaster, and it's hard to get good information. There's certainly a strong degree of instability. So I agree completely with my colleague from the House. I think we need to navigate carefully, try to get good information when we can. It is important that the meals program is something that we can spend the millionaire's tax money on. And unlike the rest of the revenue that supports the budget, it is growing at a fairly substantial amount. So that gives us a little bit of flexibility to supplement if we need to. But I do want to say, I actually got to spend some time in the cafeteria here last year, and I was thoroughly impressed by the offerings, by the nutritional quality of those offerings, by the morale of the students at what they were being served, who couldn't wait to tell me how excited they were about different things. And I never thought I'd be so excited to get photoed with an entree, but I did do that, the photo op, and it was amazing. And the district deserves a lot of credit for that, because it has made an incredible difference from my perspective. And just the boost in morale was amazing to me. I can recite my own food experiences when I was in high school, and they certainly not like what I saw here last year.
Well, our food service director, Sarah Littman, is incredible.
She absolutely
She
is.
incredible. And she fought hard for that universal food program.
I just wanted to add that one of the things that under the Healy administration, when she came in, she set up was the Federal Funds and Infrastructure Office, which at the time was, with the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, and all the other funding, of how we can attract that funding to Massachusetts so we can do, emerging technology and all those microelectronics and all these other things. And that office also, as I understand, has a position in Washington to really kind of understand what's going on. And 100%, it's unknown, and uncertainty is what we're seeing right now. But it's very helpful to hear that for you guys that looking at the 1.8 million, what are those programs that we critically need to hang on to and fight for? So we can communicate that to those who are right on the ground, like, we really need this. I mean, the one thing we are seeing kind of nationally is those that are loud and like, oh, okay, well, for 30 more days you get that funding. So I just think outlining it and understanding from you guys, what are those programs that are critical to for the functioning of the school? And if they went away, it would, not just, we couldn't have the program entirely. Just those type of conversations are helpful for us to know as, we navigate this, very uncertain landscape if we moving forward, and doing the best we can do to make sure that we can maintain everything that we're doing. I mean, if we have obviously, if the sky falls, we need to reevaluate, but hopefully it won't. And as Rep. Shan mentioned, like, to be optimistic and stay strong, but be ready to communicate those in those emergencies, what it is that we really truly need is really important. So thanks.
I know we get a list of all those grants and what we've gotten so far for the year and what we're expecting for the year through our finance monthly reporting. So I'm sure that the superintendent can get that off to you.
Yeah, we can definitely get you. I mean, the two largest, IDEA and the Title I, but everything else is, and those largely act as revenue offsets in the budget. So it wouldn't just be program that goes away. It would be required services that we have to find another way to provide if we're talking about IDEA. So it's just an instant $750,000 hole in our budget that we don't have a choice but to keep spending, so, which would be a challenge. But I can definitely get you those numbers. Yeah. Can I ask a crystal ball question? So, I'm sorry. So, right, so Senator Tar, you mentioned the fact that the Chapter 70 formula is already giving more than, by holding us harmless, we're already receiving more. And I know that's an argument that proponents of Chapter 70 will say. It's enrollment-based, and that's good because it addresses the needs. Those who should get more are getting more. Those who don't need it, the towns need to find a way to cough it up and, pass overrides and figure it out, right? And that was not an argument. I was saying that's out there. So, right, so I was just pulling up the Chapter 70 sheet. So for this year, we're slated to get $9.488 million. If we were not held harmless, we would get $5.278 million. So without hold harmless, we lose $4.21 million. That's real. So I guess my question is, I fully agree, and we have spent lots of time talking about this with the roundtable, that we're now getting momentum on a solution long-term, but that's years in the making. Is there any sentiment for the folks that believe Chapter 70 is the right formula and the right figure, and therefore don't believe in minimum aid because it's a Band-Aid that shouldn't be applied? Is there any momentum, I guess, on both the House and Senate side, with an understanding that now that there seems to be that momentum, that we have 232 of 400 and some odd, right? It's more than half, approaching 60% of districts in hold harmless with the Student Opportunity Act fully or almost fully implemented, that Houston, we have a problem. Is there momentum in understanding or a movement towards minimum aid for a year, 2 years, 3 years as a stopgap until that ultimate solution? So I guess it's a question about kind of the sentiment, where it's generally, there's a lot of, again, last year started at 30, went up to 104, highest ever. This year it's starting at 75. That certainly feels like that's a better floor and that the ceiling is higher. But yeah, I guess that's the question is, do you feel like there's sentiment as a stopgap in the current and in the near term?
Yes. So, and I would agree with Representative Kastner, we're starting at a better place than we usually do in this discussion, because the governor's budget pretty routinely starts at a much lower number than what we're seeing here. And I do think there's a sentiment to try to use this tool as much as we possibly can to respond to that immediate need. The difficulty is going to be the constraint of revenue that we have available before we realize any federal reductions. And so I definitely think that you will see a lot of consensus around moving that number to a number that's at least $104. The question will be, do we have the resources to go beyond that?
I know, it's always me, I'm sorry. MSBA. So first of all, I think I can speak for every single person on the committee and say we all did joyous dances when Brian told us he got that phone call. And we know that you have put in multiple letters and appearances and spoken in our favor. And we greatly, greatly appreciate that, because this building is having a plethora of issues that are chunking holes in our current budget as it is. I just wanted to, I guess, say that as bills are coming up, we saw a bill in there, for instance, that would allow the MSBA to include incentives for in-district special education programming spaces. Anything that you see along that line would be tremendously helpful for us. We have employed a strategy years and years through Shannon in making sure that when we have the opportunity to build these in-district special education programs where it can save us money over those out-of-district tuitions, we've been able to do that. Being able to be reimbursed for those spaces and for other spaces that we may have in the building. We have a lot that see a lot of community use. I know, Newbury is going to have their town meeting here. So being able to sort of account for some of those uses as well would be tremendously helpful as we're going through this process, so that it's not just a school of classrooms, right? It's a school that's truly functioning as a school. So we would love to hear that. And if you can, again, continue to help us through this process. I think, we'll do our best locally, and it can't come soon enough. We're pushing to get a building committee put together and all the paperwork done and everything like that to just keep it moving right now, because we unfortunately recently had to close our middle school gym because there were so many leaks from the snow melt that it was unsafe with the puddles on the parquet floor. So, I mean, that's sort of the scenario that we're in right now. And then one other thing I wanted to mention, because I just think it's been a frequent topic of conversation, this was our transportation bid year. We actually lucked out compared to other districts. I can say I went in expecting a $600,000, $700,000 increase. We fortunately saw like a third of that, which was fantastic. But the reason that we saw a third of that was because we had 2 bidders. I know for you, Senator Tar, especially because you've been around for a long time, this has been something, the monopoly, I'll put it out there, that One Beacon has on our transportation. Fortunately, Coach has started to crop up in our area. They were too high. They came in significantly higher than NRT, which was the One Beacon subsidiary that came and bid on ours. They are in Newburyport. Coach is servicing Newburyport right now. I think anything that, I mean, I can say that stopped our gaping hole here from being significantly larger than what it could be, because it literally saved us money in having that bid come in. My perspective, I think Brian's perspective as well, Coach's bid forced NRT's bid to be lower. Otherwise, we would have probably seen that $600,000, $700,000 increase that we were thinking we were going to see. So I know that's a drum that you've been beating forever. I hope you'll continue beating it, because it did help in a way that we didn't expect. So anything that we can keep having go in that direction would be fantastic. So
obviously happy to continue to be focused on this. I mean, the lack of competition is certainly causing a huge problem. And as you know, an idea that I put on the table last year and I'm going to continue to pursue is that in the event that we don't get more than one bid, should we have a default number that's produced by the rate setting commission the same way that out of district sped placements? Now, I know we had a problem with the 14%, but generally speaking, the idea that someone's going to set a reasonable rate and providers will have to follow it may be a way to fill that gap, and I'm going to continue to pursue that.
There's also a component of the Municipal Empowerment Act that would allow municipalities to start their own busing service again. So it's just put that out there.
Yes, and I appreciate that. And we've actually been in conversations with Worcester, who is sort of setting the model for launching their own busing for their school districts. And we looked at that, and we couldn't make the numbers work yet. But it actually, I mean, the higher the numbers go, the more favorable that looks, obviously.
Yeah, I think if there were grants and other opportunities there, on paper, we don't have the economy of scale with 20 buses versus Brian Allen's 100, 250 buses or whatever it was in Worcester. But certainly something, I never thought I'd say that, but certainly something we'd be willing to do, bring our own buses in-house.
And one of the things that's always said why we're not 100% reimbursed for buses is because they were saying they felt that we wouldn't go out and find bids to keep the amount lower. So the fact that we don't have a choice when we go out, maybe if the state did pay 100%, you could control how much the bus companies are charging us. Yeah. Does anybody else have anything for the legislators? Go ahead, Paul.
And just following up on the buses too, is that some of our harder to fill positions are sort of in the middle of the day, part-time type positions, recess monitors, lunch, cafeteria workers and things like that. And being able to bring the busing in-house, it might also make it easier to have full-time employees doing a couple of different jobs in the district and putting more under our control. So and then the other thing that we haven't really talked about tonight is we have a 16.12% health insurance increase, and we've been told we've got 2 more years of this range at least. So health insurance blew a hole in our budget, and any statewide help on that, because it's not just Triton facing that, that's a state issue as well.
I want to address that too, because we're in an area where we're paying Massachusetts rates, but we're going to New Hampshire for care. And I find that aggravating. And I've joined the Healthcare Finance Committee this year, so I cannot promise anything. But I will be looking at those issues. Traditionally, people come to Massachusetts for care, but I have to leave. I know you do too. So we need to address that in some way. So healthcare affordability is going to be, I think, a top priority of that committee this year.
Just one other thing about busing. I know that there's a lot of restrictions for drivers to get their licenses. I don't know if there's anything in the works to try and help reduce some of those restrictions that are needed to drive a bus, because that could possibly be why there's a lot of shortages of bus drivers as well. And it's very expensive for people to get their licenses.
Well, we actually did avoid a crisis because of the impact of a law that required the look back to go back further on the CDLs for the folks that are driving the buses. Mm-hmm. And that would have created a lot of folks who would lose their license and wouldn't be available. So we actually, again, would have gone backward. Fortunately, we were able to enact a remedy in a supplemental budget to change the impact of that law to keep those folks on the job. But other than that, your point is well taken. So,
just to continue on that as well, I know there's, at least I've had a couple conversations about just that, especially when they brought in the National Guard to have for school bus drivers a couple of years ago. Just in that there aren't a lot of places you can go and be trained. It's Haverhill, one of the locations, but just across the state, and the cost for the license itself, and just the scope of how what is it that you need to be a safe, capable, responsible bus driver? You don't need to be able to fix the engine necessarily. But just really understanding what the criteria is. I mean, it just to make sure that we're being reasonable in terms of the need for bus drivers and having all of the skills needed to make sure that they're certainly doing the job in the safest ways possible for all of our kids. But just I think I haven't had a lot of legislative necessarily conversations, but just the concept of, are we looking at this through the right lens to get to the outcomes that we're looking for, to have build a workforce. So thanks.
Yeah. Being someone who drove the bus and went for my licenses and everything, having to name everything in the engine compartment, I thought was just ridiculous. Because if I have a bus full of kids and my bus breaks down, I'm not going out there with a pair of pantyhose to put the flywheel back on.
But I bet you could.
So anything that you can do to help our 3 towns would be greatly appreciated. We had many staff members here tonight advocating for our schools, and I really appreciate them being here to advocate for what they believe it should be done. Because it's helpful for our towns to hear what is needed for our schools. So I appreciate you guys being here. I know you come here every time that we ask you, and I appreciate. Does the towns have anything that they would like to? You guys want to say, ask the senator say anything?
I would just add, as someone who's had my CDL for 22 years, I'm not aging myself. What we're talking about is a federal law. It's not a state law. You have to, the federal law requires everyone to do those tests. But Massachusetts, in their infinite wisdom, makes the rules harder to get your CDL. And when you're going to pay someone $20 an hour and they have to pay $7,000 to $8,000 to get their license, eventually you're not going to have drivers that are going to drive a school bus. So I think advocating for a more understanding of actually what the laws say. I mean, sometimes as legislators, we forget and take ourselves outside of the table we're sitting at, the desk we're sitting at. Actually, could someone actually do this? So it's extremely hard to get bus drivers to actually get their CDL license. As I know, I have multiple employees who have the CDL, and that's the first thing they complain about. I got to pay them $6,000 to $8,000. When am I ever going to get that money back? It's extremely hard. It's becoming to where you're not going to have CDL drivers in the state of Massachusetts soon. You're going to see them coming from New Hampshire, Connecticut, Rhode Island, everything but Massachusetts, because it's one of the hardest states in the whole country to get a CDL. And also, don't get me going on the electric trucks. So, I actually said to their school board recently, I said, okay, well, so in the infinite wisdom of the state, I understand they want to go green, but do you understand how much a school bus that is electric actually costs before you implement a law for the small communities like this to pay for a bus? The average bus would be about $600,000. Do you understand how we can't afford, the busing company would not be able to afford to buy 20 buses and keep it affordable for us? So I would ask, when you go to your legislators, there's little things like that you can go that are baked in budgets that we can't control, unfunded mandates. As I'm always fighting for the school, I'm probably one of the loudest of the 15 leaders of the 3 towns. Unfunded mandates is the biggest problem that we see as leaders of our 3 towns, because we have to provide an education for our kids. But we also have to provide police for our kids, fire for our kids, senior centers for our kids. So our budgets are increasing, like I constantly say to the board, in 3 years I have sat on the board of selectmen, it's almost $3 million in 3 years. So it's $1 million a year on average. We can't, with 2.5 plus growth, we're not going to be able to keep up with this. And we just keep, we hear funding's being taken away, and just slowly. Well, Salisbury's a little bit better because, we have a little bit more growth going on than Newbury and Raleigh, but Newbury is very tied with their growth. not to speak for Newbury, but they're very tied with the growth. We all talk about this. All 15 of us are individually talking to each other about this stuff. Raleigh's really struggling with some growth issues. Salisbury, again, we're doing a little better, but at the end of the day, I hate to tell this school board because they truly passionately care, and then I see all these teachers out here passionately caring, and teachers who are parents. I'm a parent, I'm a graduate of this fine high school. I spent some detention in this room before in my life. It's extremely frustrating. When I go online, it's simple, seeing what other communities who are very wealthy communities, but they have a lot of land mass and more representatives, and I see a lot of the legislators saying one thing. I firmly believe we are all judged by ability to help people less fortunate than us. I know Senator Tarr, I've said it to everyone I can imagine. I think it's funny when there's certain towns and state, and it's not a part of our districts, who advocate for the millionaires tax. They get all the millionaires tax, they get all the funding from the school systems, and they still complain that they don't have enough money for the school systems, why small rural communities like ourselves, we are struggling. Every penny we have. Neil is amazing, and Karen is amazing when it comes to finances, but they're literally going down to the pennies on trying to find ways to give this school and our children an education. And it's becoming unfair to small rural communities. We are, all three of our communities are some of the oldest farmers communities in the country. We have old, aging 55 above communities who are on fixed incomes. They're not going to be able to continue to give these tax raises to them. So what do we do then? Are you prepared? The state legislators got to understand, are you prepared to, some of these communities might be coming in receivership because we just don't have the money with 2.5 plus growth that we're not going to keep up. So we can sit here and talk about what can you give me, how can I get there? It's to the point that the legislator of the state has to understand you're literally killing your small communities right now with the decisions you're making at the state level.
I think our three legislators, no, I know that. But I think, unfortunately, you said it, we're in this small little section of the northeast part of Massachusetts. We're up against Worcester and all these bigger communities. So I know that our legislators are going to fight as hard as they can for what they can fight for us.
Excuse me, Linda, can I just interject for really quickly? To kind of put a underline under what Mike just said, the issue that our small communities have is that, to speak to Senator Tarr's hopeful solution to the Chapter 70, the state, the Commonwealth has an obligation in its Constitution to provide a public education to all of its children. It's not fair and it's not equitable right now, the way the funding formula works. Because the Triton Regional School District, because we have a regional school district, we don't have a line item in our budgets that have a school department. So we have to absorb the cost of a regional school district, which is an average-size school district, $52 million a year. Our three communities are small towns. We have between $20 and $25 million, roughly, budgets for the year. Because the Commonwealth has not adequately funded the public education through Chapter 70, and that money has not flown through to our communities, over time, the cost of providing a $52 million a year school to our communities has shifted away from the Commonwealth onto the three towns that couldn't even override our way out of it eventually, even if we wanted to, because of Proposition 2.5. So you have three small communities with $22 million a year budgets paying for a $52 million a year district And the state is not even paying, what are we getting, 17% reimbursement now from them? Something like that? It's, yeah,
Next year will be about 17.6% of our budget.
Okay.
It's Chapter 70.
so now you have over 80% of the cost of the school district falling on the three communities. It's unsustainable. It's a train wreck hitting us in the face. It will bankrupt the communities. It cannot be unique to Triton. It cannot be unique to Newbury, Raleigh, and Salisbury. I think you have a path forward with this, looking at this Chapter 70 formula committee. Anything that we can do, that I can do, to help you rally to get this fixed, it's unsustainable, and it will bury not only our schools, but it will bury our towns eventually.
I want to thank you guys for being here again, and I will send you that information that you've asked for. And we're all in this together. We have our town representatives here, we have the school committee and yourselves. It takes a village for us to all do this, what we have to do.
Just as we close, I want to thank every single public servant here for the work they do. We couldn't do this without you. So thank you for your service.
So we appreciate our partnership with you, and we appreciate the work that we can do together. As I mentioned, when we did the Student Opportunity Act, a lot of the leadership came from this region. And so we have the opportunity to do that again, and I would just stress the importance of the strength in numbers, and Project 211, things of that nature are going to be critically important. Nothing is a given until we do it. And so we've got to make sure to get that over the goal line.
Absolutely. We have two really great minds here with Brian and Narissa, and we're very fortunate to have them.
We're fortunate to have all of you, and we thank you for that. And again, we thank you for the partnership.
Thank you.
But let's go home.
We still have to stay here, but we still have our budget to talk about.
Well, thank you guys so much again, and it's really also helpful to hear those kind of outlier drivers to, I mean, health insurance and just, you know, there's just basic education, and then there's things that just happen, whether it's a special ed a couple of years ago and the health insurance going up so drastically, but, or just helpful for us to know in the narrative. You know, numbers are fantastic, but also the story and what it means for all of you guys is really important as well. Thank you.
Yep, thank you. Yes, we'll take a 5-minute break before we delve Okay, focus. FY '26 budget. Committee members, it is now down to us, and we need to provide final guidance to the administration as they prepare the budget documents for next Wednesday's vote. Based on everything that you've heard tonight, I would ask for your input now.
So I want to be cognizant of the fact that there is a thin line between making a principled stand and becoming a quixotic pain in the ass, and if I'm not over that line, I've got to be getting close. But I did have two things that I wanted to bring up that continue coming to me because I feel strongly enough about this that I need to be able to know that I left no stone unturned. So the two issues I have, one is fiscal and one is, I'd say, philosophical and procedural or strategic. From a fiscal standpoint, one of the things that we haven't talked about that concerns me is that we have, as was noted several times tonight, been very good about putting ourselves in the best position to borrow money since I've been on the committee. This is such a bare bones budget. I have deep concerns about the possibility that that undoes that we wind up in a situation within the next, call it 2 years, that we will need to dip further into stabilization. We will need to use E&D to run the operating budget, and at that point, we will have undone 5 years of work. We're betting that on I almost said continued operation and functionality of this building. Continued would not be the correct term there. So that is one thing that concerns me greatly. The other is, what's that? Yeah.
So this is my understanding, and I'm sorry to put you on the spot, Brian Perry, but my understanding was that we can use stabilization for building repair and maintenance if it's needed, and it's not a penalty to us as long as we're not using it for, like we can't use it to fund custodians, right? But my understanding was that it's not a penalty if we're using it for things like the tight tank repairs and a roof repair and stuff like that. Is that accurate?
I mean, I can't certainly speak on behalf of the rating agencies as far as penalizing. I mean, my understanding, the intent of the capital stabilization is for unforeseen capital expenditures that are fairly significant to operations and cost, and we've seen that, as you mentioned, with the tight tank. It's not used for operational purposes as far as funding custodians or supplies, et cetera, like that.
And that was part of the discussion. It's been probably 2-3 years now. So that was Kyle and me at the time having the conversation with Moody's, and they said that specifically, exactly what Brian said, that, of course, tapping your reserves is not good, right? It's going to cause attention, but that's the designated purpose of that is to have the ability to not have it impact your daily operation, so.
And I totally agree with you about E&D. I just wanted to clarify that to make sure that I was not personally misunderstanding.
Right. Now, E&D is the bigger concern to me there, but I'm just wondering 100% where we go. And even with stabilization, once we pay for the feasibility. Thank you. For that takes a bigger hit. My second concern is a little bit more philosophical, but I think it speaks a little bit to some of what we saw here tonight. When I think about this budget, I don't think there's anybody here who thinks that this is good for the schools. Not a single person at this table. We are operating out of concern that those who oppose it will step up and vote it down. That creates a structural advantage for those people. They don't have to set foot in this building. They don't have to stand up and make an argument. They win without having to do anything. We're giving them that example. I personally, I know that there's a structural advantage to one side or the other no matter what we do. I would far prefer to give that to the people who are passionate, who are showing up, who are making the argument in favor of the schools. Our operating protocol, the very first thing it says is we do what is in the best interest of the students and the schools above all other interests. And I feel like we are prioritizing the interests of those who are not acting in the best interests of our schools. I know it's a risk. It is absolutely a risk. If we do what I have been advocating, we could lose. If we put forward the budget with the cuts that are in it, we do lose. And we don't lose for 1 year. We're not going to get an override next year. The year after that, we're probably looking at a building override. 3 years after that, construction. With last year's cuts, that's 7 consecutive years of underfunding with no guarantee for years 8, 9, 10. This is a generational issue that is going to that is not going to be corrected for maybe any student currently in Triton. And when something is that big, personally, I would just rather take the risk. Specifically because when I was thinking about it, if we go with that higher number and lose, we would likely cut. Doesn't necessarily need to be cuts of the 1.2 million or so that we're talking about right now. It could be half of that, and we're still coming out ahead. If we go forward with the current budget and lose, there's nowhere to go. We can't go down from that. It just gives us more space. And I don't know, I feel like that is actually, to me, that feels like less of a risk. I know I'm on a limb here, but I can't, I need to be able to look at myself in the mirror and at least know I said this, because it really concerns me.
Can I ask 2 questions? Clarifying. One, so what you're suggesting is you want to go back to the
3.5 or so where we were.
Okay. And you know Salisbury's going to say no and will not override.
They've stated that too.
Right.
Yeah.
There is no, they've clearly stated there will not be an override on the table. So anything over what they can support will be 1 no vote.
Okay. And then, so the thought is that Rowley and Newbury would have to pass the override, and that would be your 2 votes, and then that would be essentially devastating cuts on Salisbury for having not gone for their override. Just this is not a whatever. I'm just thinking this through in my head. And then
just to answer that.
Yeah.
To my way of thinking.
Yeah.
We need to be concerned with the schools first. That's Salisbury's strategic mistake. That's how I view this.
Okay.
If they choose not to do that, I think it's foolish, but that's like, I'm looking at the schools first and advocating for the schools first.
Yeah. Okay. And then continuing on my clarifying questions. So then you're saying Salisbury says no, Newbury and Rowley, if one of them doesn't pass or both of them don't pass, then you were saying take it down to somewhere between where we're at.
Yeah, it gives us room to
Here.
maneuver.
And 3.7, and you think that would pass?
I don't know. But again, I keep going back to, one is a risk, one is a guaranteed loss.
And I think if Salisbury is already a no without an override, one of the other two towns, knowing that Salisbury's going to say no, could then not have an override and say no as well. And then you're already down two towns.
Paul, I think it would be I hear you. Please don't take this as I disagree with your viewpoint at all. So that needs to be prefaced. This isn't great. No one's sitting here, like, I'm not sitting here thinking this is so awesome. Like, I'm so excited about this. And I hear your strategy, and I think if all things were created equal and those three towns did not talk or share that level of information, it might possibly work. But where literally two of the three towns have, I think, did Rowley send like a certified letter? No, but they've stated this is what will happen. And now we have Salisbury literally stating it's a no. I don't know if that risk is actually going to pay out, but I worry that it harms our ability to work with the towns to get ourselves back to a place where we want to be. Like, I wonder, and I'm not talking political capital, I'm talking trust with the three towns. And to me, doing what's best for our students is navigating that trust where we are hearing them and we are doing our best, because our students do have to go home. I mean, they do have to leave a Triton school and get on a bus and get off that bus and go home and have those town services, whatever they may be, whatever they look like currently. And if we navigate this wrong and we break trust, and then the towns suffer, and then the school suffers, I think we then failed our students on a mass level. And that's that part's what's kind of heartbreaking, is that anything we do is a balancing act. But you're right, no matter any decision made in the towns for any of the people that sat here and us, students are losing, and they're losing big. Our staff is losing, it's losing big. I worry with that strategy. The one thing that we have as a committee is that we've worked really hard to build those relationships and that trust in the benefit of our students, not because we think they're a priority, but because those relationships benefit our students in the long run. That's my only concern. Once we break trust, do we get that back? And I don't know. I don't have the answer. You could be right, and I could be completely wrong in how I'm looking at it. I don't know.
Part of my way of looking at that is that with certain individuals differently, the towns do not have my trust. We have come to them year after year negotiating against ourselves, and they have not come back to us with that same level of devotion. That goodwill that we have built has been entirely one-sided.
Sorry, but you were sitting here actually, probably at the table as a FinCom member, back when we tried to open many doors when I first came on in 2015 and just got shut down before we could even have a conversation. So to say that we haven't built anything here, I don't think that's fair.
I'm not saying that we haven't built anything.
I understand we all have trust issues, but
I'm not saying we haven't built anything. I'm saying personally, I have seen it, since I've been on here, I have seen it as one-sided, and I think it's time for them to show some reciprocation.
Like I said before in other meetings, it's going to take all of us. We're going to have to sit down with the school, with us, with the town representatives, and the people of these three towns, and allow them to make the decision of what they want for their schools. If you don't vote for this, this is what you're going to not have, whether it's town services or school services. Like I said, we are going to, once we have the number that we have for the vote, we are going to make arrangements with the three towns to start talking to the people of those three towns. I think it's incumbent upon us as school leaders and the town leaders to start asking the towns what they want. Because inevitably, the school budget is never going down. And we had our legislators here to have a discussion of what is coming in the future, but we don't know if those are going to ever come to fruition. So it is up to us to just have the town start deciding what they want for services in the schools. And you're right, but I mean, look, this year and last year, Rowley didn't come with a certified letter telling us they can only give us $100,000. So that is a progress of us getting better relationships with our towns. You don't have the towns accusing the schools or the schools accusing the towns. If we start doing that, that doesn't help any of us. I get what you're saying. There's not one person at this table agrees with this budget. Our town leaders don't believe that this is a good budget either. But we've got to come to something and give them guidance as to the direction we have to go.
Yeah, and I don't want to keep us here all night. I had to say.
You can say whatever your opinion is. I always feel that you should say what you feel. And if that's what your opinion is, I respect it.
I think the struggle is too that we're all trying to do the thing with the least impact, right? And the least impact to Paul is looking like, set your budget high and then take your chances. And I don't know about your idea of just, I think you're going to have to come way down if that fails. And my bigger fear when I'm thinking about less damage is I think that dooms you for years to come, right? It's not small cuts that you have to do for the next whatever years. It's going to be really big cuts that you have to do for however many years. I don't know that everybody else shares my outlook, but I guess for me, trying to do the least damage possible while getting to a yes is where I'm sitting. I think keeping Salisbury to yes helps us. Not even listening to anyone, but just looking at things statistically. I mean, Rowley and Newbury in their last 25 years worth of overrides have like a 1/3 passage rate. It's low. When you look at, outside of our towns at districts that tried overrides last year, it was less than half that passed. So I feel like it's a very, very long gamble to put it on two towns with overrides, knowing that you already have one no, and expect that to pass. In my mind, doing the least damage is, kind of what's the highest number that we can stay at, and then the least, where can we find revenues? Where can we try to do the least damage possible with getting to that pass? And that's obviously going to require passing at least one of those two overrides to sort of stay at the level that we're at right now. But I mean, we're in a corner, right? We don't have a choice where there's only one override or no overrides this year, right? We just have to do our best with that situation because we don't make that call.
So
I don't disagree with you either, Paul, about the budget, and I've said over last year and this year both that I think Newbury is shifting and can and will pass an override to support the schools. And I think, Brett Alger came tonight and talked about talking with the select board, and part of that is, can you get the parents and the grandparents who want to support the schools to be able to be at the meetings where they can effectively do that? And part of that is on us and mobilizing people and making sure they're aware of what's happening, and other pieces of that are timing and space. But to the point of the strategy, right, like part of our budget issue, a small piece, but a part of it, and maybe it's not so small, is that there are a lot of children living in our communities who aren't here in Triton, and that negatively impacts us through choice and through charter. And I look at the opportunity we have, what's under our control with that, of a new, a renovated or a new building that people want to be in, a community space that people want to be in, and seeing that as an opportunity to start trying to reverse some of that trend of our declining enrollment by bringing in the people who are here in the communities but not attending our schools. And over time, that makes it a longer-term attractive place to be for families to move to. And that's a piece of the budget picture as well. And if we force our communities into a position where they lose the trust with us because we're saying, well, we're gonna force this budget on you that you've told us that you can't support, you know, if that happens too much, then I think that new building, you know, comes into jeopardy as well. So, I mean, I voted last week not to come down to this new number, and that's sort of that strategic point is where's the highest number that our communities can support so that we're doing the least damage. But I do think we have that issue of forcing a budget that isn't supportable harms us both more over the longer term than staying with this number where we're seeing cuts that we are not going to see come back in the times that the children in the elementary schools now are ever going to see come back. That anything the wellness coordinator is not going to be back. You know, I do very much worry about combining the Essential and TLC program because I worry that one hard move undoes that $200,000 that we're trying to save, you know, this year. And I worry about some of these other things. We know we're going to have to bring that back. We know we're going to have health insurance increases again next year. We know we're going to have cost of living adjustments and all of that, in addition to all of the uncertainty that we just talked about with our state legislators. But one of the things that I definitely heard tonight is we need to start putting some actual cuts and not to be determined cuts, because that was anxiety that we had tonight, and 3 months of anxiety or 4 months of anxiety in our schools will spill with our teachers and with our adults will spill over to our children. So we need to start working on that, I think.
Just my thought on that. I think we can do, again, going for the path of less damage. I honestly think leaving it there is the best thing we can do. I know that that's an uncomfortable place for a lot of people to be, but I think not knowing, right, whether this stays here, not knowing whether there's additional revenues that we could use to offset this, because we're at step 1 of 4 in the state budget process, not knowing all those things, I mean, we could be doing significant damage in identifying a lot of these cuts when there are so many unknowns. And I hate to be punting that to the end of, you know, but it's basically going to be the end of the school year, right? It's going to be May 13th or later, right, that we would know what direction we were headed in. But I personally would rather leave it till we know the full scope and then make educated decisions on that, rather than do a peace of mind identification right now. And I say that with my own peace of mind and knowing all of your pieces of mind and everyone's peace of mind, right? It's not like we're all going to be affected by that, but I honestly think we can, that it's the better option to not identify those yet. That's just my personal opinion.
I just want to make sure the battery is working. Can we identify cuts that are non-personnel, like the buses? We know we're not going to add the 2 buses. I hate to say it, but I don't think restructuring the operations manager is a great move this year. I mean, I don't want to get it down to 0, but we should get it down lower so less people are concerned.
Yeah, I guess I could say, you know, doing some mathing. I think we could, if we get a little more revenue, right, I don't want to make some assumptions. I think I think there's more savings with medical, but that's
that plane has not landed, right? So with the discussions we've had to date there.
Probably not a great analogy these days, but.
Oh, yeah. Back that up. Thank you for that. I mean, if we look at, right, we talked about delaying a purchase of some science curriculum materials. I think if we have a little more savings with medical, if we didn't restore, or if, and again, if we ran buses as they existed today and took those two buses out, excuse me, 155,000 there, not add an assistant facilities manager, that leaves us with, on my math, about 90 grand that we got to balance out. I don't know if I'm ready to say, I think, right, the facilities manager, yes, that's in this, at this moment, I think that's a wise choice to say out. We're not going to add that. That medical savings could change. Other things could change. So I think there's some things to say. I guess I would say, talking around, we can't guarantee, but I think we can get to that 432 without touching another individual. There's some assumptions there, but I think we get most or all the way there by changing those things. Still impactful, for sure. I mean, the two buses, I worry about deeply.
Can we put them on paper?
Can we? Yeah.
Why, though?
Because saying it and putting it down, why are we hesitant to put it down on paper?
Because we haven't had those two runs for a couple of years.
Correct, yeah.
If we win the lottery, we put them back. No harm, no foul. Yeah.
So I'm just speaking from Finance Subcommittee, where we are looking at a $200,000 left unencumbered in this budget, and knowing that, those haven't been filled this year, it means that we have a little wiggle room in there right now that once we pull it out, we wouldn't have, if we were experiencing the same situation next year, we wouldn't have that. I do think, we have stabilization that, we've been reluctant to touch, not knowing we had an MSBA approval coming that would allow us to cut the amount that we'll have to spend out of that for feasibility. But I can just say from Finance Subcommittee's point, knowing that that was there as we saw that number dwindle and dwindle and dwindle as we came into the end of the year, it's kind of comforting because otherwise we're going to hit red.
And not just that, if we continue to keep it in there and figure out as we go through this, if we're able to keep it in there still for next year, maybe that transitions into the TLC and Essentials program positions that we need to put back in if we have to get to that discussion next year. So cutting it right now and eliminating it before we really actually have to be the named thing that's being eliminated, to me, it's a little bit more comforting to keep it in there as long as we can. And then if that ends up being the cut, so be it. But we haven't named it at this point.
But then we're leaving all that angst and people are applying for other jobs. I mean, that's what I'm trying to, we're not going to lose a bus to another district.
To Matt's point, I think the concern is, we're going to be forced to wait until May 13th. If you are a staff member, an educator in Triton, and it's been floated at any point in time that your position, your grade level, we did talk about class sizes a lot. So that having those thoughts out there and then hearing from our staff and saying please don't if you're a staff member with options and you're worried about that cut coming, I don't want to lose good people because we didn't put, cuts on paper that had nothing to do with staffing to kind of avoid it. I understand the need to hold, but also if you were looking at this, that's a lot of anxiety about whether or not jobs are available next year. If we can put something on paper that doesn't touch personnel, I would prefer it just to assist because May's pretty late in the game.
So to make sure I'm clear, right, when we were talking back about Salisbury not being able to approve the 3.5 million, they've said
it's a hard no on the tentative budget as written. So that 432,000 in the final budget, we are cutting, right? Or finding other revenues. So I guess I go back and forth in this. I can see not listing them, but I also worry about the perpetual angst. And I think if we were saying that there were additional hypothetical cuts that we needed to make, that would be different, and we leave it wide open versus we know we have to find this 432,000 somehow. And so maybe it's that we carve that out as, there are other identified cuts. Carve those out and articulate those as those are definitive. Additionally, here's how we have to make up if we don't get additional revenue. On the table are 2 bus runs, science curriculum, right, those things, the assistant facilities manager, so that we can say, right now, we don't see a path where we're cutting staff beyond what's listed here, and maybe we can find in the final budget a way to kind of carve that out differently, to say it's this amount of cuts, and then there's wiggle room, right? Because none of this happens, right, the buses, none of this happens until the budget's finalized. So if we say we're cutting 2 runs, no harm, no foul, because they don't exist right now anyway. But then if we miraculously, minimum per pupil goes up to 200, and we live in Bruce's world, Senator Tarr's world, then awesome. We've got another $250,000 sitting on the table, and we don't make those cuts. That's new revenue. I think we've made it clear to towns that if any new revenues come in, that 2.45 increase is the increase. The difference will be how we're offsetting with other revenues and restoring things back. So, yeah, I guess I see the point that it's important to give clarity because this is going to linger past hiring season. Yeah.
I just want to ask, because I'm confused there. What is the mechanism for adding things back, like you just said? Is that because if we don't vote the budget, we can't spend it?
So if you voted a bottom line that says $430,000, and maybe we change the language to cuts or additional revenues, if we get new revenues in, we adjust and only cut down to where we need to be. So towns are approving the motion, it's very specific, the bottom line operating and capital. There's an argument to say that it's line by line because you have a document in front of you. The motion that carries to town meeting floor is that bottom operating plus capital. So as long as that doesn't change and their assessment doesn't change, you get more revenue as long as it's within, right? There's an argument there to bake in additional cuts if you think you might get more revenue. So as long as it doesn't change that bottom line, that's still in your park.
I was just going to say, too, I haven't been at the other town meetings in a while, but I know Rowley only votes their assessment. Can't recall for the other 2. It's been since I was chair, so that I went to those. So, 3 years now? 4 years, somewhere in there.
Yeah, it's just in the general omnibus.
I'm gonna use up all my time. I'm trying to kill this battery.
Chatty to that.
And I think there's a value in going to town meeting and saying, this doesn't include any cuts if you pass it. I mean, personnel, teachers.
I agree. I do agree. I feel like that is, we've spoken, was talking to other Newbury parents, just that's a really hard sell when you're going, please pass this override, and if you do, we still have an undesignated number of cuts. I mean, and these are reductions, right? There's absolutely no, unequivocally, these are reductions from what we should be doing. But that feels very different than class sizes, specialists. So I agree, Matt. So what I'm hearing is the budget, the tentative budget, I forget the exact number because it's not the nice round numbers we're using, but not the $2.625 million increase in the tentative. We're going to go with the 2.45 that's represented here. And we're going to do a little work in that
in, this document ends up in there with the narrative to explain those additional, it'll be additional revenues or reductions, and put things we have on the table and explicitly say that we don't anticipate any further personnel cuts beyond what's identified here. Obviously, those are, there are folks impacted on the sheet. They're aware. That's a different story.
The new bus contract that has the penalties in it, without that facilities manager, are you fairly confident that we can monitor and penalize NRT? Because service issues right now are ridiculous. And if we can't enforce the language that we put in place, it's not only not incentivizing them to fix it, it's a disincentive to make any gains at all, I feel like, right? Because once we say, like, we can hold your feet to the fire, which is essentially what we said, and then we're like, oh, but we're not actually going to.
We will.
I want to, yeah, right?
So yes, we will absolutely hold their feet to the fire. I do think there will be significant motivation in the schools with the principals, assistant principals, and admin assistants to make sure they're tracking, right? Because if they can be part of a system that helps improve, yes, it's on Brian, Courtney in our office, John in the interim. The reality is they're dealing with it real time with buses coming in late, getting that call at 2:50, hey, bus 14 is covered by 12 and 13 and 11, kids on 11 in this street are going on that bus. I will be bringing to you next week a recommendation for the appointment of a replacement for Brian. You know that Dave Vertolino will also be, you don't know that, Dave Vertolino, who you know will be in as an interim through July, will also be here next week. And then I will be recommending a new 3-year contract. I'm not going to say a name publicly yet, in process of notifying the current district. But there's full understanding of the breadth of the position, and energy and enthusiasm to do that part of it, for sure. Yes. So we will be able to enforce it.
Is that something that you can report to the finance committee of how the bus company's doing and how much money we're getting for penalties?
Did you just do this? You did, didn't you? I would have done this, but that's okay.
We need to fund our school.
That's right. Yeah. We can report however you would like that to be reported. Mostly, we're just going to do it.
Yeah, because I think it would be good to report to the finance committee because they control the money.
Yeah. I mean, the best case scenario, I'm not reporting anything to you because the buses are running on time.
Absolutely.
And for us to say, right, there is a value, like we keep talking about this, we've said the first priority is subs. From subs, then we want to restore those runs. There was no guarantee that we would have those 2 runs for next year. They were working on it, right? They had 4 new drivers in the pipeline. So for us to now say, we can't afford those, get the subs, they are very motivated to make sure they're on time and not pay those penalties next year. So, say it again?
So we could set up a hotline for
Yeah,
reporters.
I hear those work really well.
Okay, so the direction that we're given to Brian is the 2,
That sheet.
this sheet.
That sheet.
245. Thank you.
Yeah.
I can't even read it.
And then we'll massage that 432,000.
Does everybody agree with that number? I know this side of the table. I don't even have to look over here right now.
I have no poker face, what can I say?
It's a good thing.
But do the rest of you agree with that number? Okay, so that is the direction, Brian. Is there anything else anybody would like to say? Matt?
Make a motion to adjourn?
I'll second.
Any discussion? I want to thank all of you for being here tonight. Have a nice evening. You need a vote.
Vote.
Oh, sorry.
All those in favor?
Any discussion? All those in favor? Have a nice evening.